It is a Thursday edition of the Bullpen with Adam the Bull. It's October the 20th, 2022. The Guardian season is over, but the Cavs season got underway with a loss, and Darius Garland got hurt. We'll talk about all of that coming up. I'm joined by my good friend, the great Joe Vardon of The Athletic. We're talking hoops and baseball with him next.
Podcast is not for the faint of heart.
And I do think it's time for the Browns to move on.
It's not for those who ride the fence.
He's proven nothing.
But if you're looking for someone who tells it like it is about Cleveland sports,
everybody does fandom their way.
You've come to the right place.
I don't think he's any good.
It's time for the Bullpen with Adam the Bull.
All right, we are back and happy to be joined by Joe Vardon of The Athletic. There he is. Joe, how you doing?
Well, first of all, that intro is sweet with all the video. And then I love that this is called the Bullpen because I'm sure all your listeners want to know that for many years, I was in the top 10 in all-time relief appearances at the College of Worcester. So,
is that true?
It is true.
Really? I never knew that.
All that means is that we were either way up or way down. In
okay. And the College of Worcester is Division III, right?
Yes, Division III, but we were very good.
Yeah.
And senior year, we beat Ohio State down there in Columbus. So yeah, we were the bee's knees there for a while.
That's the cool thing about baseball in a way. Like a Division III team in football is not beating a Division I team. No. Right? That's never happening. Even Mount Union would get their butts kicked by any Division I team. But in baseball, it's weird. Like, this routine, especially maybe not as much now because they don't draft as many players. But I remember when I was calling minor league baseball in 99, 2000, 2001, we'd routinely have 5, 6 guys drafted from Division III schools, you know, they were later picks for the most part. But and in baseball, it's just the type of game where you get one good pitching outing, a kid that fell through the cracks or whatever, and you could be, that must have been, I mean, you guys must have been going nuts when you beat Ohio State.
Well, it was a good week, and there's a couple of things. Nick Swisher was on that team.
Oh, funny!
And a couple of the guys who there was at least one other pitcher from Ohio State who ended up in the Indians organization and briefly pitched in the big leagues. He was on that team, but it was a Wednesday night, and so they didn't pitch any of their top guys.
Yeah, sure.
We threw our top guys like I think everybody pitched in that game, and I think the final score was like 11-9. But yeah, you know, it was we were ranked number 1 in the country in Division III at that for that week.
Nice. And
so it was like sort of the height of our senior year there. And yeah, that was kind of the cherry on.
I think I have been to that college because, you know, I was at Brockport as a student for 4 years, which is Division III, and then I called games for Utica College, which is also Division III, and you know, both those schools, especially Utica, but both of those schools played a lot of teams in Massachusetts. I can't remember what sport. I don't know if it was basketball. I don't know if it was football. Did they have a football team?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I'm pretty sure I was there somewhere in my 8 years of calling basketball, football games. We didn't do play-by-play for baseball because, as you know, Division III facilities generally, maybe yours did, but generally don't have good facilities for broadcasting a baseball game.
There was a press box. There still is. But Worcester is also a really good basketball school. And I think both of those schools you mentioned, Utica and Brockport, had come through for Christmas time tournaments. So I definitely can see that you may have been down in Amish country.
Yeah, no doubt. I remember the one arena that I remember, though, another Massachusetts school is Amherst, because they had that crazy. The basketball gym looked like it was like 200 years old. Have you been in that gym?
No.
Oh, okay. No. But anyway, we could reminisce on Division III stories all day. I don't know if anybody else cares, so we'll keep it moving. Let's start with basketball, and then we'll get to the Guardians after in the end of their season. The Cavs. It's weird in the NBA because they play. You know, this town, especially, as you know well, is so football obsessed that in a way it rubs off on the way people react to baseball games and basketball games. And you can't react to a baseball game or a basketball game the way you do football. If you lose a football game, it's a disaster, or potentially like the Cavs losing last night. Yeah, you as a fan, you want to see your team win. I get it, but the loss itself, I mean, is meaningless, right? In the grand scheme of things, does it really matter that they lost?
Oh, I mean, it couldn't matter less. And,
right.
Toronto is a heck of a place to play.
Yeah.
Really tough place to open. And then having Darius get poked in the eye like that.
Yeah.
I thought it was a wonderful game. You'd like the Cavs not to turn it over as much as they did, but I thought it was a really good product for opening night. And I thought you saw some really good stuff. I mean, Donovan Mitchell looked great.
Yeah.
And, I think you're much more focused on, Chicago, Washington at home, Orlando at home. So they have a chance to get off to a pretty good start here.
You mentioned Darius Garland getting hurt. He somehow got scratched inside his eyelid, which seems almost impossible. Like, how does that happen? You hate to see it. It looked kind of harmless when it first happened, but you could tell he was very wobbly getting off the court. How concerned should we be? This doesn't sound like it's anything too serious, right?
Well, I'm a little concerned.
Okay.
I am. I did not like the way he got up and how long he was down.
Yeah.
And then just hearing about how swollen he was in the locker room afterwards, players were joking about it. I think Jared Allen said that it looked like Darius had gotten beaten up, and so that's not good. And that means the eye is going to be so swollen. I just hearing all that, I haven't checked in with the Cavs this morning, but yeah, I could see him missing some time for sure. And they're cautious with injuries anyway. So, should we be worried about how this impacts, whether they make the top 6 and what happens in April and May? No. But he might be out a little bit.
Yeah, that'd be disappointing. Obviously, as we said, it's not about really the wins, losses, especially early in the season. It's about developing that chemistry, right? Like, he's got to get used to playing with Donovan Mitchell. They all have to get used to playing together. And you hate to see it, especially because injuries last year really crushed his team. I mean, they were playing great basketball the first half of the year, and then the injuries piled up, and, I don't want to say it went to hell, because they still had a good season overall and a surprising season, but how important is it for those guys, especially Mitchell and Darius, to play together, to get used to playing together?
So I think this is important. I think they're both really good basketball players, and I think they won't have a problem coexisting. My bigger question is they have a question in this lineup, and it's at the 3. And JB decided to start Karis LeVert there last night, and so obviously he's going to get the first crack at this. But with Darius out of the lineup, Karis moves back to his more natural position of the 2. And now you have, I think, Jetty was out there to start the second half last night. But that's not how they want to go. Like, they want to know who should be at the 3. And for whatever time Darius is out of the lineup, they're not going to get that question answered. And so then when Darius does come back, now you have to allow the time to figure out, well, who's supposed to work there as that 5th piece. So I'm concerned as far as continuity from what happens at the small forward spot.
Is the development of Mobley's offensive game, in addition to the chemistry and with Donovan Mitchell, but the develop, because I think well, let me ask you this first. For the Cavs to ultimately win a championship with this team, does Mobley have to be the best player eventually? Or no?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's actually true, if he has to be the best player.
Right.
I know that they are counting him to be a player who changes the direction of a franchise. And I actually think that they're not sure if he's ready quite yet for that, which is why they're not making a trade to upgrade that 3 spot, and why they're pumping the brakes when you acquire a Donovan Mitchell, and then the rest of us say, well, okay, now you have 3 All-Stars, maybe 4. Shouldn't you be a top-line contender? And Kobe saying, no, there's a runway here. I think that all ties back to Mobley. Like, they don't know how much better he actually got in the summer. I mean, they saw him work out. They know that they felt great about his progress, but how does that translate on the floor? And I think we saw it last night. Like, he got off to a great start, but he wasn't as good in the second half, and he didn't get as many looks. And I think he finished with like 14-5, which is fine. But they lost the game, and they didn't have somebody in that area taking over, and so I think he needs to continue to get more comfortable and do the things that he worked on in the off season, and they actually did not translate last night.
Does JB Bickerstaff have to make it a point at times of like working on his offensive development in game, even if it ends up costing them a game?
Well, that's a really good question. And JB spent a lot of the preseason talking about Evan being the Cavs' best player without necessarily being their top scorer. Different ways that he impacts the game. It's going to be tough. I mean, it's going to be tough for Evan to become that 25-point per game scorer.
Sure.
In part because he's playing with two other guys who can really fill it up. And do you want to go away from Donovan Mitchell right now? So Evan needs to be able to attack when he catches the ball up at the elbow.
Yep.
He needs to initiate more from the top of the floor. He needs to push it in transition. And we saw that last night. He had that nasty spin move and kept it and went and dunked in transition. That is what he worked on in the offseason, that play. And we saw, I think, in the first half. But that is where he's going to impact this game offensively, cleaning up more on the offensive glass. That's going to be his first thing, especially when he's playing with Donovan and Darius.
So Joe, famously member of the big trio of Cavs media from years past with you and Jason Lloyd and Dave McMenamin. And everybody remembers when you guys came on our radio show, and we did. I think you were on for 3 hours. Was it 3 hours?
It was 3 hours. Not to interrupt you, but somebody said that. Somebody brought that up to me yesterday.
That's amazing.
I can be at a golf course, I can be at a grocery store, and if somebody recognizes me, they usually say, "Hey, man, I still think about that 3 hour show you did with Bull and Fox." So, awesome.
Well, that is awesome. That was one of the best shows we ever had. It was great having you guys on. Now, we all know Dave has gone Hollywood now. He's a bigwig out in L.A. But now that, let's face it, the Lakers are falling apart. Are you guys recruiting Dave to come back to Cleveland? Because the Cavs in the next few years appear to be on a track where they're going to be much better than the Lakers. Can you bring Dave back? That's what we want to know.
I don't know that I can bring Dave back. I think we've lost him to Los Angeles. I think we have. He certainly misses us. He misses all you guys out there. That's for sure. It's interesting though. Like, if you talk about the Lakers and our good friend Dave, and then another good friend of mine, Nick Friedel, who's another ESPN employee.
Right.
And the point is when these companies like ESPN or even us at The Athletic, when we put people in markets because the team is good.
Right.
That is an interesting life decision for both the company and the employee, because you're going to a market because, LeBron's there and now AD's coming. It's the Lakers. Great. Or Brooklyn. They have a big three. They're going to win the East. And then in Nick's case, there was a month and a half in the summer where it looked like the Nets were going to become the Utah Jazz.
Right. Yeah.
And so I just wonder, as we go forward, like, how many of these decisions will be made based on who is in the market at that time, because we have learned that A, they're not going to be there forever, and B, once they get there, it might not work out anyway.
Especially in this NBA where the players have so much power. Now, as of now, Durant and Kyrie wanted out, especially Durant, and it seems like they couldn't force their way out, at least at this point. Maybe that changes, but often if the players want out, they get out. So it's much easier than ever before for players to, star players certainly, to change teams in the NBA. So it's a good point.
Yeah, the Nets are a very rare case here where they actually just didn't want to trade Kevin Durant.
Right.
They could have. I think that the trade that was on the table with Boston, where you get Jaylen Brown and maybe Marcus Smart, or maybe it was Derek White, or you say, well, we don't want Jaylen, we want Jason Tatum and one of those guys. That is reasonable. Like that is a reasonable get for somebody who's played barely half the games, actually less than half the games over his 3 years in Brooklyn, who's 34 years old or whatever he is, might be 33. Considering how good either Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown is and how young they are, like that for a disgruntled star, that is a reasonable
definitely.
And for Brooklyn to just say over and over again that we're going to take every asset you have if you think you're getting Kevin Durant, and B, there just isn't a trade out there. I mean, that just wasn't true. They just didn't want to trade him. And so this is a very rare case of a team sort of like successfully rebuffing a star's demand to get out.
And, if Kyrie and Durant could ever stay healthy and play a full season, they could be good, but who knows? Now, a superstar they had last year, James Harden. Mm-hmm. You recently sat down with him for an exclusive interview for The Athletic. It was the only interview he did. Harden has been widely criticized, right? But it's an interesting story. Obviously, Ben Simmons, finally played yesterday for the Nets. I know he didn't have a great game. I didn't watch the game, but at least statistically, he didn't have a great game. But Harden fitting in Philadelphia. I read your article. It was great stuff. It was really I always find it fascinating that you have a bunch of quotes in the beginning of the article where he's like, "Yeah, I'm always criticized. People think I'm being selfish, and I don't care. But he goes on and on and on and on. So obviously, he does care. How did you find him? And do you buy what he's selling, that he's being unselfish in how he handled his Philadelphia contract?
Well, I mean, when you're as famous as I am, I mean, these stars just easily they towards me. No, I mean, the Sixers had come in town, and I know him a little bit just from having held this job for a while, and I know their PR staff as well. Joel did not make the trip. Mm-hmm. And so it was just James in terms of stars. And he agreed to a short interview post game. And I think he had some things that he wanted to get off his chest. That, I ultimately asked him if he thought he got enough credit for the sacrifice that he made this summer, which is essentially he declined his player option and signed a new short deal that is cheaper than in this year than what the player option was by about $14 million. And, you can be cynical and say, well, he didn't have any offers for a max contract outside of Philadelphia to begin with. And so he had no choice, but that would not be fair to him or fair to the situation. He could have opted in and played this year out at the $47 million number that it was. And then gone back to the Sixers next summer and signed another max contract. I mean, that absolutely could have been the case. So he did help the organization in the short term by giving back some money, which enabled them to go out and get a PJ Tucker. So James had been ripped all summer long for how, I guess, poor he was for somebody of his caliber in the playoffs against the Miami Heat. And just sort of how average he was playing alongside Joel Embiid for those 2 months that he was there. And so he's trying to reset the narrative. And, I think one of the first things that he's looking for is to say, hey, like, I did do this thing and give back $14 million so our team could be better.
Joe, one of the things I really respect about you, beyond the fact that you're an excellent writer, and I've said this to Jason too, because I feel the same way about him also, is that you have found it. This is not easy when you are around players. I don't cover, I've been in locker rooms in the minor leagues, but I'm not in major league locker rooms like you are. And you have to find a balance of being able to be critical of players while being fair. And even if you do that, the player still, because like you could say 99 good things about a player, say one bad thing, even if it's fair, and they could still take that personally and be ticked off at you. So finding that balance is tricky. Some people can't. right? Some people just feel like they got to kiss the player's ass all the time, otherwise they're not going to get any information. Mm-hmm. And I think you have found an excellent sweet spot of you are critical, but at least how I see it, I'm sure most players do, you do it fairly when you are critical. And so it seems like that puts you in a good position. Do you feel like the players respect that you deal with?
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for saying
You're welcome.
That is certainly how I have tried to do this in now 10 NBA seasons. And I did find that, especially when I was covering the Cavs every day. And I was told that actually LeBron respected that. And that is sort of why he opened up to me.
Right.
Because he first of all, he sits in the locker room, and I've said this on the radio show a number of times, but he's in there watching. He's watching everybody.
Yep.
He's listening, and he's trying to find out, who you are and what you're about. And he was leery of me when he came to Cleveland, and I came to Cleveland. He had known that I had come from covering politics, and but he saw that I was there to do the job. And that the job entails being critical but fair, and that also I was there every day and so available to listen and talk it out if somebody didn't agree with something that I had said or done. And so I really do feel like that helped me inside that Cavs locker room. It helps with Kyrie, who can be difficult to work, and and on down the list, J.R. Smith and Richard Jefferson and. And Kevin, I mean, Kevin's still here, obviously. So that relationship has more layers to it now. But yeah, I mean, that's just it. I think these players, especially the older ones, but they do understand that you have a job to do. They would like to be friendly with you, but they're not your friend.
Right.
And they certainly respect the work if you're doing it more so than somebody who is, trying to be phony and kissing butt, that kind of thing. So yeah, so that's certainly something I try to avoid, and it's worked for me.
When you develop a relationship with LeBron, mm-hmm. who is the star in the NBA, does that help you with other players? Like, does it help you just because they see it? Or does it even get to the point where LeBron may say to the other guys in the league, the other stars, "Hey, this guy's cool"? Like, does LeBron even go as far to vouch for you? And does that help, or is it just that maybe like a James Harden or another player sees you? It's obvious you have a relationship with LeBron. He respects you, yet you're still critical when you need to be fairly. And so he's like, okay, well, if LeBron trusts him, even if LeBron didn't say anything, maybe I can trust him too. Do you think that factors in?
I do. I really do. And I think, like James now, like, does he remember that 4 or 5 years ago that I was around LeBron all the time? I doubt that. But there certainly was a time where players were seeing that. And certainly in the Cavs locker room, I mean, that absolutely, because I don't know how many of the listeners and the audience remember this, but my first job in Cleveland, covering the NBA, was actually, I was hired by the Plain Dealer specifically to cover LeBron.
Right.
We had the Cleveland.com hired Chris Haynes to cover the team, so we were a tandem.
Yeah.
But my beat was actually LeBron, and I'm sure that helped me with Kyrie. Because he was watching and sort of, kind of understanding like who I was and what I was there for. And it certainly did open doors. And then, when that team broke up, I mean, as sad and as bad as that was for all of us Clevelanders as a city, all of a sudden, like, these all-stars that are on other teams and these executives that are on other teams, I mean, that helps me. That helps my career,
right?
Because those are people that I spent all that time getting to know and developing as sources, and now they're all across the league. So there is no doubt. I mean, there is no doubt that getting a chance to cover LeBron at that time in his career and the way that I was able to do it has opened many doors for me.
Joe, we're going to take a quick break, 60 seconds, and then I want to come back and talk some baseball with you. You know, you're big. We talked about it already. You're a big baseball guy. You played baseball. The Guardians have had a heck of a season. It ends in sadness, as it does for 29 teams. And we'll have Joe rejoin us in just a second. But first, folks, I got to talk to you about Built Bars. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you're depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor. Delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. Built has done it again. Cookie dough chunk puffs, light and chewy texture, 100% real chocolate, only 160 calories and 15 grams of protein. You're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff. Whether it's a snack, post-workout, late-night treat, want a quick bite, whatever. Go get it today. Go to Built.com. Use the promo code LOCKEDON15 and get 15% off your order. Again, go to Built.com and use the promo code LOCKEDON15. All right, we bring Joe back. Oh, we switched from the Cavs background to a Guardians background here. Joe, how many games do you remember? Because I believe I picked the Guardians to go 82-80 or 80-82, something like that. What did you think they were going to be when the season started?
I just watched that lineup on opening day out there in I think it was Kansas City and just screaming at the TV like they can't hit.
I know.
So I thought that 500 would be an excellent year.
Yep.
You know, you're just hoping. I mean, you knew that Hosey was going to be here long term because the deal had just happened. But otherwise, you're just hoping that they got to hold on to most of their guys. And certainly, you know, like I have a thing every year. Like when I get into May and June, whether the Cavs were good or now in this current job where I leave to go cover the conference finals and finals. My thing is when I get back and I can turn the Guardians back on, I just hope they're still in it.
Right.
And
sure.
I was thrilled, you know, come mid-June to see what I saw. But I still can't, in a way, I can't believe that they didn't fold under the pressure of a pennant race in September.
In fact, it was the opposite, right? I mean, they basically got the White Sox and Twins to fold. They just took their souls in that last, couple of weeks there by they win 7 out of 9 against those two teams in that 9-game stretch, something like that. I mean, they just beat them both down, and it was over.
Something like that, or 10 out of 12.
Yeah.
It reminded this team in a lot of ways reminded me of the 07 team, going all the way back to they entered September. The Tigers were still hanging around. Like the Tigers were the more veteran team, and the ESPNs of the world were expecting the Indians to fold in September, and the opposite was true.
Right.
Indians just stepped on the gas and just pounded them. And then in 07 in the ALDS against the Yankees was the Midge game. And so I had a great time this year. I actually got to help cover that series this year for The Athletic. And one of the stories we did a look back at the 15 years ago of the Midge game and then how that might happen again in this series.
Yep.
And it was just great to see the parallels between those two teams.
Yeah, it really is. It really is remarkable because, as you said, the lineup. You look at the lineup on paper, and it was just like teams that have 17 guys make their major league debut are supposed to finish 20 games under 500. Usually, it's teams that are out of it, and so they're bringing up all these kids to see what they are, or they just have no choice. So we're going to throw these kids at the wall in the beginning of the season, and usually we're going to suck. Now, next year, some of those guys might regress because baseball is the weirdest sport, right? Like usually when a guy becomes good in basketball or football, they don't really regress unless they get hurt. In baseball, like you have Cody Bellinger, the guy first couple of years in the league, he looked like he was going to be a Hall of Famer, and now he's probably going to get non-tendered by the Dodgers. I mean, so it's weird how that happens, but it really, they were the second youngest team ever to win their division. They just broke all the rules by doing this, and it really was a remarkable run. Now, can they capture it and keep it moving forward? Do you think this is going to be a team that's consistently good?
Well, so you have Jose Ramirez, and he changed. He's the first guy that changed the future of this franchise
No doubt.
by wanting to stay long term. And I'm sure you've covered that ad nauseum. The next thing that changed this organization was the emergence of Oscar Gonzalez in right field, because for however many months they didn't have anybody in the outfield that could drive the ball and hit with any power at all. And they would have had to either hope somebody long term from the farm system developed into that guy, which can take years, or they'd have to package a bunch of them and go trade for somebody who's older and, you know, maybe on the wrong side of his career. So now you have Gonzalez, who is, I mean, is he even 21? I don't know. He's a child. But he's going to hit right-handed home runs, I think, for a long time. And Stephen Kwan I think he's legitimate. I think he's going to be very good in this league for a long time. And you know who Josh Naylor is. He's not an all-star,
right?
But I see a major regression. So your position players, I think those are the guys that you can count on. I know that I'm leaving out an all-star in Andres Jimenez, but you could see how he struggled a little in the playoffs, and so you hope that he's not a regression candidate. Rosario, you're not sure if he's going to be back. You hope he is.
Right.
And then Miles Straw, I mean, no home runs and 600 at bats or whatever it was. That's not great.
No.
That's so I think up the middle, and then, you know, obviously the catching situation is what it is. So I think up the middle there defensively and in the order is where the questions are. When you go into a season with Shane and Tristan and Cal Quantrill as your top three starters, and then you have Clase and Stefan for sure in that back end, I think you're going to win games. I do. So I think the Guardians are going to be good for a long time. But they need, like you have said, they need to do a little bit here and a little bit there, take that next step, and you have to guard against the regression of a couple of the guys who were good this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it a little off the air. I love the idea of potentially bringing Carlos Carrasco back. You mentioned to me Francona would love it. I'm sure, he spent most of his career here. He'd be comfortable here. He's not a great pitcher. He's not the pitcher he once was, but he's still on a good team. As a third starter and then slotting Quantrill back to 4. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'd like to see them move on from Plesac. Honestly, I know he's got great stuff, and I don't think it's a terrible idea to see what you could get for James Karinchak in a deal. Do you think that's crazy to move on from him?
No. I mean, Mark Shapiro used to say that the hardest thing to do in any year when you're building a team is to build a bullpen. From one year to the next, you do not know. You just don't know what you've accumulated out there. The Guardians are going to be a little different because they may have the next Mariano Rivera literally under contract for the next 5 or 6 years
at no money. And no, crazy.
I mean, so it's a little bit easier of a puzzle to solve there, but James Karinchak absolutely fits into that mold of you don't know what you have from one year to the next. So I mean, he's one of those pieces that if you can get something, if you can get a bat in return, you do it.
Right. And that's the key. I would like them to get better at center field. But I don't think they're going to do it because obviously they made, not that it's huge money, but they made a long-term commitment to Straw. Nobody's going to take him in a trade, probably. I mean, or if you did, they wouldn't get much back. So I think the other two areas they got to upgrade is at catcher, and maybe it's Bo Naylor. And then whether it's first base or DH, that's it. But they've got to add some power because the reality is we all love the way the Guardians played. Love it. And it's fun, and next year when there's no more shifts, it's going to be even a bigger deal because guys that can put the ball in play now that they can't shift, especially look at a guy like Jose, right? Like they always overshift with him. Well, they can't do it, so he's going to get even more hits, pulling a lot of those ground balls that he was hitting into that were being fielded by the second baseman in short right field. Those are all going to be hits next year. So I think that's big, but you do have to have more power than you currently have, and the number one place they can do that is first base / DH.
Yeah. I mean, and obviously they need to. I think they need to be better defensively at first base too.
Definitely, yeah.
who both guys dropped throws at times and stretched weird and so I'd love to see Naylor as the Guardians DH and to have somebody over there who plays 130, 140 games and hits 25 plus homers.
Last year in free agency, I was saying, and I know a lot of fans don't like him because of the history, but I wanted the Guardians to try to sign Anthony Rizzo. I thought he would have been a perfect fit for this team. And he's not the player he was in 2016 with the Cubs, but he's still got a ton of power. And as we know and we saw, he's a clutch player. He's always been a clutch player, and he's a great defensive player. Didn't happen. So, we talk about a guy like Jose Abreu, certainly older than Rizzo, but he's always been a good power hitter, even though he hit less home runs this year. He did hit 40 doubles. And he seems to me that he fit the culture really well. Is that a guy that would interest you at first base?
Absolutely. I mean, you just don't know if the Guardians can afford him, if they want to pay there.
Right.
I was thrilled when you said that name. But they have Will Brennan, they have Benson, they have Arias, they have there's a couple other guys I'm not even thinking of. So they have this super deep farm system, and they didn't trade any of the guys.
Right. Nolan Jones, Rocky O. I mean, the list goes on and on with these guys.
It goes on and on. And so obviously there's not a spot for all of them.
Right.
They chose not to enter the Soto sweepstakes. I don't know how realistic that would have been anyway. But you don't know if prospects are going to pan out to start with. And then on this team, there just aren't that many spots available. So, you would like to see them try to package a bunch of those guys to make one of these upgrades we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, Abreu's a free agent, but I mean, you'd prefer to get a younger guy that's, a power hitter. And I hadn't really thought about the trade front. Yeah, but they have so many of these young players that and you just have a certain amount of roster spots. As we all know, I mean, had there been a Rule 5 draft that year, they would have lost Oscar Gonzalez because they had left him unprotected, right? So obviously they're loaded with young talent, and eventually they're going to have to – they really will have no choice to trade some of these guys. But you mentioned the payroll, right? Or said, will they spend the money? Nobody's expecting the Guardians to have a Yankee-Dodger payroll. Nobody. That wouldn't be realistic to expect. But I don't think it's unfair to expect a team to have $100 to $125 million payroll. That seems reasonable to me. And right now, they're not close. They did have a payroll in that range in, 15, 16, 17, or maybe 16, 17, 18. I can't remember exactly what years. Remember, they spent on Encarnacion. Do you believe that they will go, even if it's not where I'm hoping for 1 to 125, do you believe they will take at least a somewhat significant payroll jump this year for the first time in a few years?
Well, I can't remember if it was your Twitter or if it was Zach Meisel's story or maybe both, but I read it yesterday that the Guardians have a history of doing this, that when they make the playoffs and they draw a little bit, that they are okay with opening up the checkbook a little bit wider. But you say, is the payroll going to jump? I guess it depends on those 1 or 2 spots, right? Like are they going to pay Abreu? I think they would do it if the right player presented itself. But I don't foresee them, cutting payroll. I mean, it's just it's going to be an interesting winter and spring as they decide how much talent, minor league talent they have, and how many opportunities they want to offer to those players who are in-house versus going out and spending money to upgrade those positions. And, it worked for them this year. I mean, that they were one of the best teams in baseball, doing it their way. So they don't have to spend the money. But it would be nice to do that because they really, really could still be playing right now.
Joe, let's wrap it up with 30 seconds on the Browns. 30 seconds on the Browns here. It's painful, but I'm making you talk about the Browns for 30 seconds. How awful are they to watch right now? I would,
I mean, My son and I, we have like a 10:30 tea time this coming Sunday, and if we don't make it back by 1, then we don't make it back by 1. And
so be it.
And growing up, like most of us from here have, I mean, really saying something, but the apathy is real. It's real.
It's remarkable too, because at least from the outside, now you know the players much better than I do. The Guardians are such a likable team. The Cavaliers are such a likable team.
Yeah.
And outside of like Nick Chubb and a couple of other guys, the Browns seem so unlikable. Like they're sliding in fans' DMs and ripping them. They're complaining about the criticism they're getting. What do you expect? People thought this defense was going to be good. It's been terrible. I don't know. It's such a counterpoint there. Like, it's these lovable young Cavs and these lovable young Guardians, and then the Browns. Ugh.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know them personally, the Browns, and so like I have a couple players in mind, but it doesn't do me any good to rip them individually.
Yeah.
But you're right. It just, a couple years ago, everybody loved Baker Mayfield, and Kevin Stefanski was new, and Myles Garrett took a swing at Mason, but he plays for the Steelers. I suppose we can let that slide.
Right.
But geez, where it's gone from there and how negative, like from Baker to Odell Beckham to all the trouble Garrett gets in.
Yeah.
And Stefanski and how that's gone. And now, obviously, with the quarterback who isn't playing and all that.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And I know some of the Browns fans, a lot of them maybe want to get past all that, and they just want to see number 4 and how he's spinning. But it's tough. It's just it makes a franchise that ruins your Sundays anyway that much harder to tolerate.
Yeah, and the owners are kind of make you sick too. But what are you going to do? That's enough talk on the Browns. Joe, I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks. It was great talking with you, and we'll do it again soon.
Yeah, we will. Thanks for having me.
That's the Bullpen with Adam the Bull for Thursday, October the 20th, 2022. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, Joe.
It was great.